just got back from Jamaica just after midnight last night. The team is here. We are weary, but most of us are here. We are not. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. And why? Because next week we will. So we want to put that teaser out there. Next week we're going to have at least part of the service that we're going to dedicate to sharing about our missions team that just came back from Montego Bay. And if you go up to somebody from the team that you know went and they say, you ask them how the trip was and they say, good. If they do that, rebuke them in the name of Jesus, because that's not what they're supposed to say. They're supposed to say, let's get together sometime so I can talk to you about everything, because we cannot in 1 word, 10 words, 20 words talk about what we just experienced this past week. So proud of our team. Again, don't want to give too much away. Next week's going to be a great week. We're going to talk about it then. We are starting a new series this morning. By the way, if you're a guest, my name is Dan. I'm glad that you are here. I am a little bit sleepy today, so bear with me. We are going to get through this. We're starting a new series today called Foolish Games. We are going to take a look for the next 5 weeks at one of my absolute favorite books of the Bible. And we're going to take sort of different lenses through this book that we know as Proverbs. Proverbs talks a lot about foolishness and wisdom and how you can have a wise life, how you can be a wise person. It's probably the most practical book in the Bible. It's just plain and simple, straightforward truth. And the beauty of it, well, I don't want to get into that right now. The beauty of it is, man, it's so relevant today. So as we started this, I want to challenge you over the next 5 weeks to do something for me. Read through the book of Proverbs. The first 10 chapters really sets up the rest of the book, so bear with it. I put in the Hope Church app, if you follow along with our service today, there is a link to YouVersion or Bible.com as well, that there is a 31-day reading plan for Proverbs. I would encourage you to do a 31-day reading plan, because that will take us through this whole series of the book of Proverbs. I promise you, 31 days is not enough. There are going to be some verses that you're going to stumble across that you could spend a whole week just on the one verse. So I want to encourage you to read through the book of Proverbs. It is a great one, even for those of you that may think that, the Bible's too hard to read. No, this is the book for you. Okay, if you are a little bit like me, I'm a little ADD, this is your book. So I want to encourage you to do that for the next 31 days. It was about 4 years ago. There was a young man who was going through a difficult time in life. And he unfortunately, because he was not doing well financially, he had some addictions that he was trying to feed, did what unfortunately many people do, and that is they go to desperate measures to obtain money. He thought that his only solution for his life was that he needed to go get money from somebody somewhere. So he put a gun in a messenger bag. He walked down into Burbank, California, and he entered into a building that he thought may have lots of money. And he thought, I'm going to get the money from this place, and life is going to be fine. And he was confident in his plan. And then he ran into one of the people in the building, and the story abruptly changed. You see, this young man decided that the best place for him to rob was a mixed martial arts gym. Matthew Lloyd learned the name Jacob Powell very quickly. Jacob Powell is a professional lightweight fighter who just happens to work out at this gym and do his skills. And he runs into Jacob Powell and begins to pull his gun out. Jacob Powell realizes what is happening, disarms him, and proceeds to put him into a submission hold while somebody calls the police, and the police come, arrest him, and also had to take him to the hospital. We would look at a story like this and say, what were you thinking? You fool. Who on earth thinks, hey, let's just go in there and rob a mixed martial arts gym? What are they going to do to us? That is foolishness. It's dumb. It's not intelligent at all. I hope that none of us would ever contemplate doing that. I think by and large, all of us want to be wise people. We want to be known for our wisdom. Deep down inside of us, we want to be the person that people come to for life's wisdom. We want to be our own little sage, if you will, that people come to us for all of this great knowledge that we have, that we can just saying pithy statements, to them, and they're going to take it away and think we're this great person. We want to be wise. I want to be wise. I hope you want to be wise. And Proverbs is a great book that tells us on how to be wise. We so want to be wise, and we so want to be good at things that we will go to great lengths to do so. One of the ways that we try to become wise people is through self-help books. If you're a reader, most of you have probably at least read one self-help book in maybe the last couple of years. Last year my big goal was to read 50 books in the year, and I only got to 32, and then my attention span went out. But hey, 32 was an accomplishment for me. I looked back through the books that I had read this past year, and I really tried to mix it up. I was doing a combination of, I read stuff like 1984 and Animal Farm and Lord of the Rings and all that, but I also tried to mix in some leadership books and theology books and so on. But I looked at a number of the books that I had read, and one I'm still in the middle of right now. And when you look at the books that I read, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that's a classic, deep work. Who Moved My Cheese? Yes, that's supposed to be a really good leadership book. I'm going to be honest, I read that thing and I still wasn't exactly sure what it was talking about. But anyway, I just heard cheese and I was in. Bored and Brilliant, about finishing stuff. Necessary Endings, I highly recommend. Great book. Currently in the middle of 12 Rules for Life. That's a heavy one. These are, I would consider self-help books. They're books that you go to find out how to do life better, whether it's, terminating toxic relationships or learning how to accomplish things better. We read self-help books to improve ourselves. And because we want to improve ourselves, we want to be able to share that knowledge to other people and be considered a wiser person. But I will tell you, of the books that were just on the screen, I read a lot of stuff in them, and it became information, but it did not necessarily become wisdom. We want to talk about what the difference is between that, because it's very key to what our big idea is going to be today. Because intelligence and wisdom are two different things. And unless we understand that, we're going to read a lot of self-help books. We're going to listen to a lot of self-motivational talks and all of this. And we're going to get a lot of information, but we're going to be no wiser tomorrow. We walk away from all of these different self-help things, and honestly, we're amused by them and we're informed. But if we don't put it into action, if we do not do exactly what it's saying, we're intelligent, not wise. We do this with life as well. People speak into our lives. We get counsel from friends. We get counsel from pastors and bosses and leaders. And sometimes when we get this counsel, we're like, wow, that's profound. And we log it in this thing up here. And honestly, sometimes we put it into action, but a lot of times we don't. And we see people, as a pastor, I've seen this. I've given counsel to people for my own mistakes. And I see them go, wow, you are just right on. And I know it's in their head, and I know if I ask them, they can repeat it to me. And then I watch them go out the door and do exactly what I said they should avoid, or not do what I said they should be doing. Intelligence and wisdom. Knowledge and wisdom. Now, the Bible has a word that is repeated over and over and over again in the book of Proverbs for a person that has intelligence but does not necessarily have wisdom. It's a 4-letter word, and it's full. Full. And you see full, folly, foolishness, all throughout the book, repeated over and over and over and over and over again. And we're over the next few weeks going to look at only a couple. There's about maybe 10 different categories, if you will, of characteristics of who the fool is and what the fool does. I taught on this lesson, or on this book a long time ago with the youth group, and I actually called the series, I Pity the Fool. Mr. T fans here? Anyone remember Mr. T back in the, yes, I grew up with him. He was my hero with the A-team. But I always remember that, I pity the fool. I pity the fool. I'd go around and say that to my friends and stuff. And the reality is I do pity fools. Unfortunately, sometimes I am one. Sometimes you are too. And it all comes down to this thing of knowledge and wisdom. Let's not be fools. Let's not play foolish games with our lives. Let's learn how to be wise people, and let's learn it from the book of Proverbs. I want to set up the book of Proverbs with a couple things. If you're following on the Hope Church app, you'll see these. I don't have these on the screen, but I want to set up the book of Proverbs this way. Number one, Proverbs, the book of it, they're promises. They are not guarantees. The Proverbs that you will read are promises, but not a guarantee. Just because it says in one well-known proverb, a soft answer turns away wrath. That's a great thing. That's a promise. But it's not always a guarantee. The reason it's not a guarantee, I don't know if you know this or not, humans are complicated. With many people, a soft answer may turn away wrath, but there are some people that are just angry or just do not like you. And no matter what you do, they are not going to like you. And so they will continue to raise their voice. So they're a promise, not a guarantee. There's something for us to try to abide by and to follow through. A second thing, though, about Proverbs is that we learn about the character of God through each of the Proverbs we read. What we are in fact seeing is wisdom from God. These are written by a man, Solomon, who's considered the wisest man to have ever lived. And so he gets his knowledge from God. He asks God for wisdom, and now he imparts it in these Proverbs. And so we learn about the character of God. How would God handle the situation if he was in my shoes? And so as we read through these, don't just think of them practically. Think about, what does this tell me about what God would do or what God would want of us? Third thing, Proverbs actually mean to be like. The word proverb actually means to be like. Proverbs work as a mirror. They work as a comparison. We can compare ourselves to these Proverbs and think, how am I doing? If this tells me about the character of God, I can now compare myself to that and establish, am I doing what God would do in this? And so they work almost as a gauge for us, a measuring stick for how well or how not well we're doing, how wise we are or how foolish we are. Fourth thing, 513 of Solomon's 3,000 Proverbs are recorded in this book. It has been recorded that there were 3,000, roughly about 3,000 Proverbs that Solomon had, and we're only getting 513. Man, I wish we had the rest. But the 513 that we get are profound and life-changing for us. The last thing I want to set up the book of Proverbs before we look at our passage today is this. Here's what's amazing about this. This is why I love this book. It's been about 3,000 or so years since this book was written. And you will read through the book of Proverbs, and it could have very well have been written last week. And there's a reason why. Because as brilliant as we are as humans, as intelligent in the information age as we are and all the accomplishments we have in America, and we are just so far, way better than we were 3,000 years ago. The heart of the human kind does not change. Our tendencies do not change. They are just as evident 3,000 years ago as they are today. So when you hear things like a soft answer turns away wrath, when you hear about in the abundance of words, sin is not absent. You look at that and you're saying, that's 3,000 years ago? Because that sure is today. There's a lot of people saying a lot of words, and there's definitely sin in there. These are just as relevant for your life today as they were 3,000 years ago, because humans don't change. We have this complicated thing in us called brokenness and sin. And that's why I love this book. So I want to start into it at the very beginning. The first 7 verses of Proverbs chapter 1 we're going to look at today, because this sets up this whole idea of wisdom and foolishness and knowledge. And we're going to have it up here on the screen, and you can follow along. And I'm going to read through this, and then I want to break it apart. Verse 1 of Proverbs says this: the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. And he gives the reason for Proverbs. He says, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. And we end at verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Going back up to verse 1, it says the Proverbs of Solomon. And I already said that Proverbs means to be like. It's a comparison there. But a proverb was known to be something to give us superiority in our mental actions. That it was to give us the advantage, if you will. When you face a circumstance or a situation, it gives us this advantage, this superiority to know what to do in the moment. When we are wise, we know how to do the right thing in the moment. Solomon, as I said, was one who asked God for wisdom. When you look at the account of Solomon, God says, what do you want, Solomon? You're the king of Israel. And he could have asked for riches. He could have asked for peace. But no, Solomon asked for something different. He asked for wisdom. And God grants him wisdom. So we know that the wisdom he shares, even though Solomon didn't necessarily live by these, we know the wisdom is from God. Solomon did some foolish things towards the end of his life, even though he was the wisest man in the world, because wisdom and knowledge are two different things. It says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of King of Israel, for gaining wisdom. Now, the word wisdom is used 87 times throughout this book. You're going to keep seeing this and be like, okay, we get the idea. Wisdom, wisdom, wise, wisdom, wisdom. 87 times. Normally, when something is said a whole lot, it means pay attention to this. This is important. And so wisdom is talked about over and over and over and over and over again. It's more than just, as I said, knowledge. Wisdom is more than knowledge, and we'll talk about exactly what that means in a second. It's amazing that we are living in the information age today. You can Google anything. I Googled some crazy things this past week in Jamaica. Just stuff that we were like, I wonder about, and we would pop it up, and man, there it is. Boom. I have it. We have all this information. Yet, even in the information age, we have less wise people. It used to be when I was growing up that when you wanted when you wanted knowledge, you went to something. I don't know if any of you, for those of you that are probably 18 and under, this is going to be a totally revolutionary new thing to you. Let me show you what we went to. It was this thing called an Encyclopedia Britannica. This was the internet. It was like 24 volumes on your shelf, and that was it. That's all you're getting. If you wanted to know anything, you go to the encyclopedia. Now we have all this other these different areas that we can get knowledge and learn and learn and learn and learn. Man, I know so many useless things, and part of that was when I was a youth pastor. Man, I would throw out useless facts like, did you know a giraffe's tongue is 18 inches long? Now, what am I going to do with that? But I know it because it's there and it's on the internet, and obviously everything on the internet's true. So we have so much information, we have so much knowledge, yet we have so little wisdom, because wisdom equals knowledge plus obedience. Wisdom equals knowledge plus obedience. It's not enough to have knowledge. Knowledge is great. Information's great. But if I don't do anything with that, then I'm not wise. So it's great that you know things. But information should lead to transformation in your life. It should change the way you deal with people. It should change your life, your focus, your goals with life. Wisdom keeps us constantly in line with what God's values are for us, what he wants, the best for his children. And he, in order to do that, he gives us these proverbs and he gives us this wisdom so that we can be for him, not against him or opposed to him, and be a fool. The verse goes on and it uses the word insight. It says that we should be given insight in this. We want to understand these words of insight, and that simply means understanding the why. One thing I've been, as I've gotten older, that I've really tried to do a lot more thought on, because when I was younger I didn't care, is understanding why we do certain things. You'll hear it in a lot of my sermons where I'll bring up, here's what we do, here's why we do it. There's something about the psychology of trying to understand why people do things. This understanding, this insight that is powerful when you begin to understand why people make some of the decisions that they do, and why really the mentality behind it. And it says, you know what? Proverbs give us, they help us for understanding words of insight. Proverbs are filled with this understanding of why people do what they do. It uses a word as well. It says for receiving instruction in prudent behavior. Prudence is skillful, being skillful based on wisdom. That you make skillful decisions. If you want to be prudent, it simply means you know the right thing to do and you are skillful in it. You aren't too quick to make a judgment, but you're also not too slow. To be skillful. I hope we want to be prudent and skillful with our decision making. It says that, one of the things for Proverbs is that it should add to what the wise have. I love that line there because it says just because you're wise doesn't mean that you don't keep learning. Just because you may be a wise person doesn't mean that you're like, okay, I'm good, got it all, don't need to learn anymore. No, it says that part of the reasons for Proverbs is that wise people can become even wiser. That they can even learn more and go deeper. Don't ever be content where you're at thinking, got it all figured out. I can take life as it comes. I've learned enough. Because the reality is no matter if you are 75 years old or more, you can still learn wisdom. We can still learn to be wise people. And so Proverbs is given for even the most wise person to learn even more, to go even deeper. And why? I want to focus on verse 7 because it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of the Lord. If you recall, a couple months ago, we talked about the fear of the Lord in a series talking about fear and what that is. And if you know what it is, it's not fear and trembling of God. Oh my goodness, he might smash me like a bug. It's reverential awe of God. Understanding how great and big and wise and loving and gracious and merciful he is, having a realistic view of who God is and being in awe of that, being speechless for what he is. That is the fear of the Lord. And it says that fear of the Lord, that's just the beginning of wisdom. The word beginning there actually means harvest. It's harvest time. You want to have fruit in your life, it's when you fear the Lord. When you have come to that point of reverential awe and frankly an eagerness to please him. You are so in awe of him, you're like, why would I want to break God's heart? Why would I make a dumb decision? I want to just do what I can to honor him. And he is awesome. And that fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. One of the Proverbs says that a fool stiffens his neck at counsel. In other words, someone tries to give him counsel and they're like, whatever. They blow it off. They see no importance in it. They got it all together. See, the fool doesn't have a fear of the Lord because they are in control of their own life. They've got it all figured out. They know how to get around anything in life, and they're pretty sure that they've got all life's answers, and they'll be sure to tell you it. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. C.S. Lewis had a quote. He said, in God, you come up against something which is in every respect immeasurably superior to yourself. Unless you know God as that, and therefore know yourself as nothing in comparison, you don't know God at all. That's deep. That says unless you understand the magnitude and the superiority of God and your tininess of what you know, you really don't know him. And so the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The big idea today is this, and I actually have a part B of this that you can write down as well. The big idea today is that fools are not stupid. They're too smart. A fool is too smart. Here's what I mean by this. Because fools think they have it all together, and they may be some of the most intelligent people in the world, just because they are that doesn't mean that they are wise at all. Because frankly, the fool doesn't need God. The part B of this is that, you know what? The wise are not too smart, They are surrendered. You want to be wise? You surrender. You understand the magnitude of God, the wisdom of God, even if it doesn't make sense to you. You understand his greatness and his grandeur and his desire to help you and to help you live a life that is pleasing to him, and you're eager to please him. You're surrendered. You understand, frankly, that you're a pinhead. I am. Man, I am sometimes. But I know I have a God that all wisdom resides in him, and I can go to him, and he will give it to me, and I can honor him and please him. Fools are not stupid. They're too smart. 1 Corinthians 1:25-31 reiterates this. We're not going to read it right now, but you can check it out later. 1 Corinthians 25:31 says, you know what? Humanity's wisdom is foolishness to God. The smartest person in the world is still a fool in comparison to who God is. That blows your mind. We have some really intelligent people in the world, yet they don't even scratch the surface of God's wisdom. Ephesians 5:15 gives us an instruction. It says this: be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, a fool, but as wise. It's my hope that as we enter into some of these things dealing with relationships, our conversation and communication, our words, some of these big themes throughout Proverbs, that as we enter into it, we begin to compare ourselves to what God's character is. We understand how great he is, and in an eagerness to please him, we choose to live a wise life. That may require some change in your life, in your relationships, in your habits. But if we seek to be wise people who love God, why would we not change? How do you know if you're too smart for God? Let me throw out a few lines that some of you might be thinking this morning. God's not interested in this part of my life. Well, that Bible verse is God's suggestion. More like guidelines. It's not really a command. I already know. Here's another one. I already know this. I know that verse. I know that proverb. I memorized that when I was a kid. Well, then why didn't I see it in your life? Okay, anyway, that's a side tangent. No need to reflect or think deeply. I really don't need to do this. I really don't need to meditate much on this. And sometimes we just don't even see a reason to do any self-examination. I'm good. Everything's peaceful. God and I are just like sort of on good terms. So no need to go overboard and be too crazy. But he's also not really punishing me for some of the bad choices I make in my life. So I think we're good. That's when you know you're too smart for God. And if that's you, lean in the next 4 weeks, because we're going to need this together. My challenge for you is this: change an area that you have been too smart by surrendering it. Over these next few weeks, this is honestly a challenge that may go for the next 4 weeks. There may be some things that come up when we deal with these different proverbs that cause you to do some self-examination. But my challenge for you is that I want you to identify that area, because all of us have them. I have it too. That I have not fully surrendered, that I have no eagerness to please God with. To fully begin that process of surrendering it to him and surrendering it to the wisdom even we see in Proverbs, so that we might please God in all eagerness. I end with a story. This is actually, I guess you could call it just a parable by Søren Kierkegaard, back in the day, philosopher. He said this: once there was a town where only ducks live. Every Sunday the ducks waddled out of their houses, waddled down Main Street to their church. They waddled into the sanctuary and squat down in their proper pews. The duck choir would waddle in and takes its place. Then the duck minister would come forward and open his duck Bible. Ducks, like all other creatures, seem to have their own special version of the scriptures. He would read to them, "Ducks, God has given you wings. With wings, you can fly. With wings, you can mount up and soar like eagles." Philadelphia. Sorry. I thought about not saying that, but I had to. No walls can confine you. No fences can hold you. You have wings and you can fly like birds. And all the ducks would shout, Amen. And then they would waddle home. Jesus said that if you have ears, listen, you know what? If you've got ears, do something with it. Don't just hear, do. And for the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at some areas that we need to stop just hearing and say, man, that really made me think or feel good. It's time to do. And to do it to please him. Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom. Let's pray. God, thank you for Proverbs. Even as we only look at a few verses and we just set things up for the next few weeks, I ask over the next 4 weeks, you would begin to churn something up in us, to begin to point out things that we need to work on, that we need to change. Lord, even those areas that we may think are off guards to you, or that maybe we think we're doing fine. That, Lord, you would stir in us a desire to please you and to honor you, and that we would be eager to love you with our choices. Father, I don't know where everybody is today, but Lord, I ask that you would begin a work in them, that you would begin a change that would make them to look more and more like Jesus, Lord, and less of what we look like now. Help us to be wise. And we ask this in your name.